as the pallbearers bring the late Pope Francis's coffin to the front of St. Peter's Square, we hear the entrance antiphon: "Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him." Word, sometimes reflecting on the questionable beard choices of some of the members, or asking about the recently departed parents of one colleague, or joking with another colleague, a pair of colleagues who had gotten married, and joking whether they would ever come back from their honeymoon, if they were going to come back to work, because he hadn't seen them reading at the liturgy at the general audiences in a while. So we can recall some of these many humorous, serious, and the many moments of the life of Pope Francis, who died at the age of 88 on Easter Monday. As we see, there are still delegations arriving for this Requiem Mass, filing in front of the coffin, set up in front of the altar of the Confession in St. Peter's Basilica, preparing for this liturgy, which may start a few minutes late, as delegations are still arriving. As they arrive, we can recall some of the teaching, perhaps very little in this short amount of time that we have, but given the vastness of Pope Francis's magisterium. But we can recall with this deed that was placed in his coffin some of his the focuses of his papacy.
Yeah, and one of the things, of course, was his attentiveness to the least and to those discarded by society. Pope Francis, upon his election, he chose to live at the Domus Santa Marta because he could not do without contact with people. And from the first Holy Thursday, he wished to celebrate the Mass of the Lord's Supper outside the Vatican, visiting prisons, reception centers for the disabled, and those addicted to drugs. He urged priests always to be ready to administer the sacrament of mercy, to have the courage to leave the sacristies, to go in search of the lost sheep, and to keep the church doors open to welcome those desirous of encountering the face of God, those desiring encountering the Lord. We know that he exercised his ministry with untiring dedication in favor of dialogue with Muslims and representatives of other religions, sometimes convoking them to prayer meetings and signing joint declarations for concord among the faithful of different creeds, such as the document on human fraternity signed on the 4th of February in 2019 in Abu Dhabi with the Sunni leader El Tayeb. We can also talk about his love for the poor and the elderly and children that led him to inaugurate the World Days of the Poor of grandparents, and of children. He also established the Sunday of the Word of God.
The deed also notes that more than any of his recent predecessors, Pope Francis enlarged the size of the College of Cardinals, convoking 10 consistories through the years, and in which he created 163 cardinals, of whom there are currently 133 electors who will choose the next pope in the upcoming conclave. And there are currently these currently hail from 73 nations, 23 of which had never before had a cardinal. Pope Francis also convened 5 sessions of the Synod of Bishops, 3 ordinary general assemblies on the family, on young people, and on synodality. He also convoked an extraordinary synod on the family and a special session for the Pan-Amazonia region. Pope Francis's voice often rose in defense of the innocent. He, at his Angelus addresses every Sunday and his Wednesday general audiences, the Pope would often conclude with appeals for peace in all parts of the world, for all sides to dialogue. He always invited everyone to dialogue, to talk. No matter what was going on in the world, he believed that the solution was to sit down and talk to one another. We all recall the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and the extraordinary Statio Orbis that he held on the evening of March 27th, 2020. The Pope prayed alone in St. Peter's Square, the colonnade symbolically embracing Rome and the world. We recall that this was a frightening time, and humanity had been stricken by the unknown plague. The final years of Pope Francis's pontificate were marked with numerous appeals for peace against the Third World War that he called, that was being fought in piecemeal, he said, as well as unfolding very dramatically in various countries, especially Ukraine, as well as in Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, and Myanmar.
And as we know, then after his hospitalization from the 4th of July, July 4th, 2021, lasting 10 days for surgery at the Agostino Gemelli Polyclinic, Pope Francis, on 14 February 2025, returned to the same hospital for a 38-day stay due to bilateral pneumonia. And back in the Vatican, he spent his final weeks at Casa Santa Marta, dedicating himself to the end with the same passion to his patron ministry. Though not fully recovered, we saw him on Easter Sunday, on April 20th, 2025. For one last time he appeared on the loggia of St. Peter's Basilica to impart the solemn Urbi et Orbi blessing. And then he drove around on the papal mobile and greeted the faithful who had gathered at St. Peter's. And then he left us the following morning. We see these beautiful images coming live from the Basilica, the cardinals and the bishops, beginning the procession which would lead us to the beginning of this solemn celebration of the Eucharist.
The deed that was placed in offered a witness to a sober and humble lifestyle, founded on missionary openness, apostolic courage and mercy, and attentive to avoiding the pitfalls of self-referentiality and spiritual worldliness of the Church. Pope Francis, we know, set out his apostolic program for his papacy that lasted just over 12 years, with his apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium in November 2013. Pope Francis.
Uko mubibona rero bakunzi ba Waramutse Rwanda, kuri uyu munsi ku itariki 26 z'ukwezi kwa kane nibwo Papa Francis warumaze icyumweru yitabye Imana. Uyu munsi wari umuhango wo kumushyingura wabereye Vatican mu gihugu cy'Ubutaliyani. Ni umuhango witabiriwe n'ibihumbi n'ibihumbagiza abayobozi bakomeye ku isi yose ndetse n'abakaridinari bakomeye ku isi yose. Abayobozi b'amatorero agiye atandukanye y'isi bose bari bahuriye i Vatican mu gihugu cy'Ubutaliyani. Ni umuhango waciye ku bitangazamakuru bikomeye byo ku isi hose, kuko Papa Francis ni umugabo wari umaze kuba ikirangirire n'umwanya yarafite wo kuba ari papa wa Kiliziya Katolika. Byamwemereraga kuba umugabo w'igihangange gikomeye kuri isi ya rurema. Ni umuhango rero waciye ku bitangazamakuru byinshi bigiye bitandukanye. Umuhango waje no kugaragaramo ibitangaza bikomeye cyane. Muri uno muhango Papa Francis wo kumushyingura, dore yuko yari amaze icyumweru cyose yitabye Imana, ni umuhango wabereyemo n'ibitangaza bigiye bitandukanye. Mbere yuko dukomeza, mbanza kubibutsa gukanda subscribe hano kuri Waramutse Rwanda, kuko nta handi uzajya ukura amakuru meza cyane ashyushye nk'ahangaha. Reka twikomereze rero umuhango wo gushyingura Papa Francis, ngo ni umuhango waje no kugaragaramo abamarayika. Muri kumva yuko ni ibintu byari bikaze cyane. Umuhango wabereye Vatican mu gihugu cy'Ubutaliyani wari witabiriwe n'abaperezida bakomeye cyane bo ku isi, abakaridinari baturutse impande n'impande, dore yuko na karidinari w'u Rwanda Antoine Kambanda nawe yarahabaye i Vatican mu gihugu cy'Ubutaliyani. Ni umuhango ngo mu mpera zawo, ubwo imva umurambo wa Papa Francis bari bamaze kuwurutsa, bamaze kuwushyira mu mva, nibwo ngo haje kugaragara ibitangaza by'abamarayika baje kubonekera abari aho ngaho bose. Ni amakuru agitohozwa, ariko uko byagaragaraga ngo ni abamarayika bashobora kuba boherejwe n'Imana, ubundi bakagaragara muri uno muhango w'ishyingurwa rya nyiricyubahiro Papa Francis. Muri kumva yuko ari ibintu byari bikomeye cyane, ko ni umuntu w'igihangange wari uvuye muri ubu buzima bamushubije mu butaka ari nabwo twaremwemo. Ngayo nguko rero bakunzi ba Waramutse Rwanda, nimba utarakanda subscribe, iki nicyo gihe ngo ube wayikora kugira ngo n'andi makuru ashyushye ajye abasha kugeraho ku gihe. Ciao.